Julian Mantle had everything most people dream of: wealth, status, power. He was a world-class trial lawyer with a seven-figure income, a red Ferrari parked in front of a mansion, and a reputation that filled courtrooms with silence the moment he entered. To the outside world, he had made it. But on the inside, Julian was collapsing. His health was deteriorating. His relationships were shallow. His days were filled with chaos and his nights with emptiness. Then one day, in the middle of a crowded courtroom, his body gave out. A massive heart attack brought everything to a halt and began everything anew. That's where this story begins, not with Julian's rise, but with his fall. A fall that led him to sell everything, including his beloved Ferrari, and disappear from the world. What followed was a journey to the Himalayas, where he sought out wisdom from monks who had dedicated their lives not to achievement, but to enlightenment. The monk who sold his Ferrari is Robin Sharma's modern-day fable about the spiritual side of success. It's not just a tale of quitting the rat race, it's about transforming from the inside out. It's about learning that true success isn't measured by what you earn, but by how you live, how much peace you carry, and the legacy you leave behind. Julian's journey teaches that burnout isn't a sign of weakness, it's a wake-up call, that our relentless chase for more money, more status, more control, often costs us the very things that matter most, and that if we want to live with joy, meaning, and fulfillment, we must first reconnect with who we really are. This audiobook isn't just a summary of a book, it's a spiritual manual, a guide for anyone feeling overwhelmed, lost in achievement, or simply hungry for more life in their life. Through 7 powerful lessons, we'll explore timeless principles drawn from Eastern philosophy, personal development, and ancient wisdom, all framed through the story of Julian's transformation. You'll learn how to train your mind like a warrior monk, how to reclaim your purpose and live with daily intention, how to turn routine into ritual, time into treasure, and silence into clarity. And above all, you'll learn that success without soul is just another form of suffering. If you're here listening, maybe part of you already knows this. Maybe you've reached a point where success isn't enough, where the grind no longer satisfies, where you're searching, not just for answers, but for alignment, for stillness, for meaning. Julian's story is dramatic, but your transformation doesn't have to be. It starts with awareness, with small choices, with remembering that your life is not a race to the finish, but a path to be walked with presence. Let this be your invitation to slow down, wake up, and listen. Because what you're looking for isn't out there. It's been within you all along. Let's begin with Lesson 1. Master your mind. The power of disciplined thought. Julian Mantle's first real breakthrough after arriving in the Himalayas didn't come from a dramatic ritual or complex philosophy. It came from a single idea: master your mind, and you master your life. Most people spend their days reacting. They wake up and immediately check their phones. Their minds are filled with emails, alerts, messages, worries, and unfinished tasks before their feet even hit the floor. The day unfolds in a state of mental chaos, rushing from task to task, problem to problem, constantly pulled by distraction and stress. Julian had lived like this for years. As a high-powered trial lawyer, his mind was sharp but scattered. He could argue with brilliance in court, but couldn't spend 5 quiet minutes alone without reaching for something. Coffee, his phone, a distraction of some kind. The monks he met saw this pattern in him instantly. They had seen it before in countless others. The truth, they told him, was simple. An undisciplined mind creates an undisciplined life. They offered a metaphor. Your mind is like a garden. If you plant and water nourishing, empowering thoughts, it will produce peace, clarity, and strength. But if you let it go unattended, if you neglect it, then weeds grow quickly. Fear, anxiety, distraction, resentment. Thoughts become tangled, and soon, so does everything else. In the West, we value speed, productivity, and intelligence, but we rarely talk about clarity. Yet clarity is what gives intelligence its power. A brilliant mind filled with noise is no better than a quiet mind filled with fear. The monks showed Julian that clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from training the mind to do less but better. The first step they taught him was awareness. You cannot control what you do not notice. So he was instructed to begin observing his thoughts, noticing the internal commentary running in the background of everything he did, noticing the moments he spoke to himself with doubt, the habits of worrying, the reflexes of distraction. He started writing things down, thoughts that repeated, fears that showed up again and again, ideas that sparked energy. This process began rewiring how he related to his own thinking. The monks told him, the mind is not the enemy, it's a tool. But if you leave it untrained, it will create unnecessary suffering. One of the most powerful disciplines they gave him was this: guard the gates of your mind. Be intentional about what you consume, not just food or drink, but media, conversations, the stories you tell yourself. Everything is input, and input becomes thought, and thought becomes identity. Julian took this seriously. He stopped reading headlines designed to trigger fear. He limited mindless scrolling. He became more careful with his language, especially when speaking about himself. And as his inputs improved, so did his mental state. The monks also introduced him to the practice of single tasking, doing one thing with full presence, no multitasking, no partial attention, just focus. Whether he was eating, writing, walking, or speaking, he practiced full engagement. The simplicity of this was shocking. So was its power. For the first time in years, he felt his mind beginning to quiet. They also introduced an exercise called the Heart of the Rose. Each morning, Julian would sit in silence and stare at the center of a single rose. For 10 minutes, he would focus only on that, its shape, its color, its movement in the breeze. At first, it was maddening. His mind raced, but slowly, something shifted. That 10-minute window became an anchor. It trained his focus, like lifting weights for the mind. The mind, they explained, is like a muscle. Left unused, it weakens. Trained daily, it sharpens. Another discipline was visualization. Each morning, Julian would close his eyes and vividly imagine the man he wanted to become. Not just successful, but calm, present, strong, generous. He didn't just see that man, he felt what it would be like to be him. The monks believed that when the mind sees something clearly enough, and frequently enough, it starts working toward it unconsciously. And science now confirms what they knew all along. This works. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. If your life is chaotic, it's not just your schedule, it's your thinking. If your relationships are strained, your focus scattered, your energy drained, it's your thoughts that are shaping those results. Julian began to feel this firsthand. His ability to concentrate deepened, his emotional reactivity softened. He felt less scattered, less anxious, more steady. It didn't happen overnight, but the more he practiced, the more he noticed a shift, not just in his mind, but in his life. Julian also learned that most people aren't thinking consciously, they're replaying. The same patterns, the same loops, the same doubts, over and over. And until those loops are interrupted, they silently run the show. He was taught to notice thought loops and ask, is this thought serving me? Does it move me forward or hold me back? And most importantly, who gave me this thought in the first place? Many of the thoughts we live by are inherited. Ideas about success, money, self-worth, failure, what's possible. Not chosen, just absorbed. And so to master the mind, Julian had to start replacing those beliefs with ones he chose intentionally. One of the monk's core teachings was that the mind is a servant, not a master. Left in charge, it runs wild, always scanning for problems, comparing, calculating, fearing. But trained properly, it becomes a loyal ally, still, sharp, precise. They gave Julian a mantra to repeat morning and night. I am more than I appear to be. All the world's strength and power rests inside me. He repeated it aloud, with feeling. Every day. Over time it began to take root, not just in his mind, but in his posture, his choices, and the way he showed up. This wasn't about blind positivity, it was about mental leadership, about choosing thoughts on purpose, just like you choose your clothes or your words. The monks called it mental nutrition. They taught that you become what you feed your mind, the same way your body becomes what you eat. So each morning, Julian would reflect on one core thought he wanted to carry through the day. He wrote it down. He repeated it during breaks. He used it to interrupt distraction or discouragement. These weren't affirmations in the superficial sense. They were anchors, tools for focus and direction. They also emphasized the link between mind and body. Physical movement, they explained, clears the mind. Sweat cleanses the mental fog. Even a walk done mindfully resets attention. Julian added movement to his morning ritual, not as exercise for the body, but as a way to prepare his mind for the day. Another tool was journaling. Each night, he would write down 3 thoughts. What went well today? Where did my thinking help me? Where did it hurt me? This reflection made patterns visible, and once he could see them, he could shift them. With time, Julian found that his thoughts were no longer automatic. They were directed. Fewer weeds, more flowers. More space between thought and action. More choice. The final insight the monks gave him was this: stillness is strength. In a noisy world, a quiet mind is a superpower. They told him that stillness wasn't the absence of thought, it was the ability to step back from it, to observe it, to choose when to engage and when to let go. He began practicing moments of stillness throughout the day. 1 minute before speaking, 10 breaths before answering, pausing before deciding. These gaps became his edge, his clarity deepened, his presence sharpened. The world didn't slow down, but he did, and in doing so, he regained control. Julian returned from the Himalayas not just with insights, but with a new relationship to his mind. He was no longer a passenger, being driven by fear or habit. He was at the wheel, calm, clear, focused. He understood now what the monks meant when they said, "Master your mind and you master your life." Because everything begins there. Every decision, every reaction, every goal, every moment of joy or stress. It all begins with thought, and thought is trainable. You don't need to be a monk to apply this. You just need to begin. Wake up and observe your first thought. Catch yourself mid-distraction. Speak to yourself with intention. Cut out the inputs that cloud your thinking. Choose one thought each day that pulls you forward. Repeat that process, not once, but daily. Because the mind doesn't change all at once. It changes through quiet, consistent leadership. This is the foundation of everything that follows. Because no matter how powerful the tools ahead may be, without a strong, clear, trained mind, you won't be able to use them. This is where transformation begins. In the next chapter, we move from thought to action, from clarity to direction. Let's continue with Lesson 2, Follow Your Purpose, Clarity, Vision, and Passion. After weeks of training his mind, Julian began to experience a clarity he hadn't felt in decades. His thoughts were no longer bouncing from task to task or fear to fear. He could sit in stillness, he could observe without reacting, but this peace led him to a deeper question, one that echoed through every silent hour in the Himalayas. What now? The monks were clear. Mental discipline is not the end goal, it's the foundation. The next step is purpose. Once the mind is steady, it becomes a tool for direction. The question becomes, what will you aim it at? Julian had spent his whole life chasing someone else's definition of success, prestige, status, wealth, recognition. He had reached the top of the mountain, only to realize it was the wrong one. And that, the monk said, is one of the most common forms of suffering in the modern world. People work harder and harder only to find themselves unfulfilled, because they never asked, is this path even mine? The monks called it Dharma, a word that means more than purpose. It means your true path, the unique way you are meant to contribute, the intersection of your joy and the world's need. Every person, they said, has a Dharma, but most ignore it. They get too busy, they compare themselves to others, they follow what's safe, not what's true, and over time their inner voice fades under the noise of obligation and distraction. The first task in discovering your purpose is simple, but not easy. It's to listen again. The monks gave Julian a daily exercise. Each morning, after his breathwork and silence, he asked one question and wrote down the first answer that came to mind, without judgment, without editing. What would I do if I wasn't afraid? Some mornings the answer was clear. Other days it was confusing. But over time, patterns emerged. A desire to teach, to write, to inspire, to live simply, to make a difference in a way that law never could. These were not new ideas, but they had been buried. Now they were returning. The monks explained that purpose is rarely discovered in one flash of insight. It reveals itself over time, through patterns, passions, and pain. The clues are everywhere, especially in what angers you, what excites you, and what energizes you. Julian began writing down the moments in his past that had made him feel most alive. Not the ones that looked impressive, but the ones that felt real, helping a young intern believe in herself, speaking to students about leadership, writing late at night with no deadline. These memories were breadcrumbs. He also wrote down what drained him, what left him feeling heavy, small, or false. The conference calls, the billing hours, the politics of power, the performative networking, these too were clues, just in the opposite direction. One of the monks told him, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs most is people who have come alive." Purpose is not something you find, it's something you remember, something you return to, and once you're aligned with it, your energy changes, your choices simplify, your motivation becomes intrinsic. But clarity isn't enough. Julian had to learn how to build his life around purpose, not just dream about it. This is where the monks introduced him to the power of vision. Every day, they said, you are either moving toward your purpose or away from it, not through big decisions, but through small ones. So the first step is to see it clearly. They gave him a blank piece of paper and asked him to describe his ideal life in detail as if it already existed, from the moment he woke up to where he lived, to who he helped, to how he felt. Not what sounded good, what felt true. Julian resisted at first. It felt indulgent, unrealistic. But eventually he let go of the filter and began to write. He described a quiet home near nature, a simple daily routine, time for reflection, reading, and family, teaching workshops, writing books, mentoring young leaders, earning money, yes, but in a way that aligned with his soul. When he read it back to himself, something in his chest opened. For the first time in years, he felt not just peace, but pull, a direction, a North Star. The monks told him to read this vision each morning after meditation, to visualize it, to feel it, to speak it out loud, not because it was magic, but because the mind needs targets, and most people never give it one.
Without a vision, the mind defaults to distraction. It drifts, it reacts. But when given a vision, it starts to filter life differently. It starts seeing possibilities instead of obstacles. It begins to notice people, resources, and chances that were always there, but now look like steps towards something meaningful.
Julian's clarity began to solidify into action. He had a vision that stirred something inside him, but the monks warned him. Vision without structure becomes fantasy. The next step was to align his daily life with that inner calling. Not someday, not after everything was perfect, but now. Purpose doesn't wait. It doesn't ask for the right job title, the perfect economy, or a round of applause. It asks for small, consistent steps taken with intention. The monks gave Julian a tool, create a life compass. A short, handwritten paragraph that defines how you want to live, who you want to become, and what truly matters to you. This isn't a list of goals, it's a declaration, a reminder of who you are when the noise is stripped away. Julian wrote his own. It wasn't long or fancy, but it was honest. It included values like simplicity, integrity, contribution, presence, and creativity, and he read it every morning, along with his vision. Over time, these daily reminders shaped his behavior more than any external pressure ever had. One of the most transformative ideas the monks shared was this: your purpose doesn't begin when you quit your job or move to a new country. It begins when you stop postponing alignment. When you start bringing small pieces of your purpose into your current life. Julian had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to start over. But the monks challenged him. Can you teach one person something today? Can you write one page? Can you speak from your values in your next conversation? That is purpose in action. And he realized that purpose isn't always dramatic. It's often quiet, invisible. It lives in how you listen, how you choose, how you show up. And the more you act in alignment with it, the more magnetic your life becomes. He also learned that purpose requires courage, not in grand acts, but in the daily decision to be honest about what you want and what you no longer want to tolerate. The courage to disappoint others in order to stay true to yourself. The courage to stop performing and start living. Purpose asks you to trade comfort for clarity, numbness for aliveness. And Julian found that once he began saying yes to what felt right, doors started opening. Conversations shifted, new opportunities arose, people responded to his presence differently.
It wasn't because he had a perfect plan, it was because he had become aligned. And alignment is powerful. It creates trust, momentum, integrity. It removes the friction between who you are and how you live.
There were days when he doubted himself, when the old life seemed easier. But then he'd remember what the monks told him. Purpose is not a feeling. It's a commitment. You don't wait to feel certain. You choose and you build certainty through action. They encouraged him to build structure around his purpose, a routine, a rhythm, daily time for deep work, space for reflection, boundaries around distractions. Without structure, even the most inspired vision collapses under the weight of daily chaos. So Julian began designing his days around what mattered. Not in big leaps, but in simple practices. morning silence, focused work blocks, time with people who lifted him. He simplified his schedule and tracked how he felt. Slowly, the life he had written on paper began to show up in reality. The monks also taught him the power of service. That purpose expands when it's shared, when it's not just about personal joy, but collective contribution. One of the elders told him, "The fruit of your purpose is not success, it's impact." That shifted something in Julian. He no longer measured progress by how much he was achieving, but by how much he was contributing. Even small moments of encouragement, presence, or honesty felt meaningful, and those moments began multiplying. In the end, Julian didn't return to the courtroom. He didn't chase the next big thing. He followed a quieter path, built on clarity and truth. A path where purpose wasn't something to chase, but something to live. You don't need a monk's robe to do the same. You just need to stop ignoring what you already know. Ask yourself, what part of me is trying to speak that I've been silencing? What am I doing that drains me, even if it impresses others? What small action would honor my values today?
Write your vision. Read it every morning, speak it out loud,
And then live as if it's real. Because when you do, it begins to become so. Your life is too precious to be lived on autopilot. And your purpose is not out there. It's waiting right where you left it. Let's move on to lesson 3. Practice Kaizen. Constant self-improvement. After Julian had begun aligning with his purpose, the monks introduced him to the next core principle, one that would transform how he approached progress for the rest of his life.
They called it Kaizen.
It's a Japanese word that means continuous improvement, but it's not about endless hustle or perfectionism. It's about committing every day to becoming just a little better than the day before. Not because you aren't enough, but because growth is your natural state. The monks believed that the moment you stop growing, you begin declining. There is no standing still. You are either moving forward or falling behind, not necessarily in terms of status or results, but in clarity, presence, and personal strength. In the Western world, growth is often framed in extremes: massive change, 10-year goals, transformations so big they intimidate you into inaction. But Kaizen is the opposite. It's based on small, consistent steps, the kind that compound over time into powerful change. Julian had spent most of his life chasing quantum leaps. He'd try to fix everything in one weekend, overhaul his habits overnight, or go from burnout to balance in a single vacation. It never worked. It never lasted. The monks showed him why. Real growth is built like a temple, one brick at a time. If the foundation is rushed, it crumbles. If the structure isn't maintained daily, it weakens. Kaizen is the mindset of building steadily and never stopping. They asked him a simple question. What is one thing you could improve today, no matter how small? That became Julian's morning practice. Not, what can I accomplish, but what can I refine? Some days it was improving his posture. Other days it was deepening his breath, speaking more kindly, reading a single page. The action didn't need to be impressive, it needed to be intentional. And the results began to show. Kaizen works because it bypasses resistance. The ego resists big change, but it accepts small shifts. When you aim for 1% growth each day, your mind doesn't panic. And yet, those 1% improvements add up exponentially. Julian applied this principle to every part of his life, his focus, his discipline, his relationships, his learning. He stopped aiming for dramatic breakthroughs and started honoring the process. And as he did, the pressure melted. He no longer felt behind, he felt in motion. Kaizen also meant taking responsibility. Every day, he asked, where am I coasting? Where am I making excuses? Where am I capable of more? Not from guilt, from ownership. Growth became less about achieving something and more about becoming someone. Someone more present, more capable, more intentional. The monks gave him a powerful reminder. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. This shifted his thinking entirely. It's not the intention that determines your growth, it's the structure. What do you do daily, without thinking, without negotiating? That's your real trajectory. Julian began building systems around what mattered most: morning routines, evening reflection, daily reading, weekly resets, not because routines are trendy, but because they remove decision fatigue. They create momentum without constant willpower. He created a short checklist he could run through each morning. Did I move my body today?
Did I read something that stretched my thinking?
Did I practice stillness, and did I track my energy or emotions? Did I contribute to someone else's growth? It wasn't about ticking boxes, it was about training identity. Each small action reinforced the belief that he was someone who grows, someone who learns, someone who shows up on purpose. The monks warned him not to confuse motion with progress. Activity doesn't equal improvement. True growth is measured not by how much you do, but by how much you expand in awareness, in discipline, in integrity. They also emphasized that Kaizen must include feedback, not just from others, but from yourself. Reflection was non-negotiable. Each night, Julian would journal a few questions. Where did I grow today? Where did I slip? What did I learn? What would I do differently tomorrow? This daily feedback loop became his quiet coach, not judging, just noticing. And the more honest he became with himself, the faster he improved. Kaizen also requires humility. Julian had to let go of perfectionism. He had to stop pretending he had everything figured out. He became a student again, curious, willing to be wrong, willing to evolve. The monks called this the beginner's mind, a state where growth never ends, because you never assume you've arrived. One of the monks explained it like this: if your cup is full, you cannot pour more in. Keep your cup empty, stay open. Julian began seeking mentorship, reading deeply, asking questions instead of offering answers. He began noticing small shifts in posture, breath, tone, focus. Nothing dramatic, but they added up. He realized that most breakthroughs don't feel like breakthroughs, they feel like small, obvious changes done consistently over time. The beauty of Kaizen is that it frees you from the pressure of needing to be extraordinary. You don't have to make a quantum leap today, you just have to choose one small upgrade and repeat it tomorrow. One deeper breath, one better word, one clearer choice, 1 hour of phone-free focus, one step into discomfort.
Those are the bricks of transformation.
Julian saw this shift play out in every area of his life. His mind was steadier, his relationships were warmer, his confidence was quieter but deeper. He was becoming the man he used to think he had to achieve his way into. And it happened not through willpower, but through ritual. The final message the monks gave him on Kaizen was this: discipline creates freedom, consistency creates confidence. Small changes create big results. Eventually, Julian no longer rushed the process, he respected it, because now the process was the goal. You don't improve your life by waiting for the right moment. You improve it by choosing growth in this moment, and the next, and the one after that. Kaizen is how ordinary people create extraordinary lives, without burnout, without shortcuts, and without permission. Let's move on to Lesson 4. Live with discipline, build inner strength and habits that last. By the time Julian had embraced Kaizen, his life already looked radically different. He was clearer, calmer, and far more intentional. But the monks reminded him that clarity and improvement are only the beginning. Without discipline, even the clearest purpose and the best systems collapse. Discipline, they said, is the bridge between intention and reality. Julian had always viewed discipline as something rigid, cold, draining, a word that meant restriction, not freedom. But the monks reframed it entirely. True discipline, they said, is self-respect in action. It's not about punishment, it's about alignment. It's choosing to act in accordance with your values, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching. The disciplined person isn't someone who forces themselves through suffering. They're someone who lives with integrity, the daily decision to stay true to what matters. Julian realized that most of his previous habits were reactions, not choices. He'd wake up and dive straight into emails, skip meals, sacrifice sleep, work through exhaustion. His days were driven by urgency, not design, and slowly that urgency had drained his vitality. The monks helped him build what they called rituals of strength. These weren't strict routines, but flexible systems designed to train discipline at every level: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. The first was a consistent wake-up time. Not early for the sake of it, but early enough to begin the day on his terms, to reclaim the first hour of his morning as sacred. No phone, no email, just movement, breathwork, reflection, and clear intention. They also introduced physical discipline, not for aesthetics, but for mental control. The body, they said, is the training ground for willpower. Every time you push through one more rep, one more breath, one more step, you're not just building muscle, you're building the ability to choose strength over comfort. Julian embraced this. He began doing simple bodyweight training, cold showers, walking in silence. Each act was a reminder: discomfort is a teacher. Resistance is where growth lives. Julian also restructured his work habits. He no longer bounced between distractions. He created windows of deep focus, uninterrupted time blocks where he worked with intensity, followed by short breaks for movement and breathing. This rhythm, he found, gave him more output in less time, but more importantly, it trained his focus like a muscle. Discipline, he learned, wasn't about doing more, it was about doing what matters consistently. When you know what matters and you act on it daily, your confidence changes, not the loud, showy kind, a quiet, steady certainty, built not from outcomes but from alignment. The monks emphasized another aspect of discipline, emotional discipline. To be truly strong, they said, you must learn to observe emotion without becoming it. Anger, fear, doubt, these emotions are natural. But reacting to them impulsively weakens your power. Julian began practicing the pause. When something triggered him, he didn't suppress the feeling, he acknowledged it. But he gave himself space to respond from intention, not impulse. This, they explained, is the foundation of inner stability. When your emotions don't dictate your behavior, you become trustworthy to yourself. And that trust is the root of all resilience. Julian also adopted a ritual of closing each day with discipline. No matter how tired, he took 5 minutes to reset. He would reflect, tidy his space, prepare for tomorrow, and disconnect from screens. This wasn't about productivity, it was about closure, about ending the day on purpose, not by default. And he began to notice something.
When you live with discipline, life gets simpler, not easier, but more clear. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop relying on motivation. You act from principle. You don't need to feel ready, you just begin. And that beginning, repeated daily, becomes identity.
Julian didn't become perfect. He still had off days, but discipline gave him something willpower never had: structure without shame. When he slipped, he returned. When he failed, he reset. The point wasn't flawlessness, it was loyalty, to the life he was building. The monks left him with one final reminder. The undisciplined mind seeks escape. The disciplined mind seeks mastery. In a world full of shortcuts, distractions, and dopamine traps, discipline is rebellion. It's the radical act of choosing what strengthens you over what numbs you. And that choice, made again and again, is how greatness is built. Let's move on to Lesson 5. Respect your time. Build routines and rituals for a focused life. If there was one resource Julian had misused more than money, it was time. In his old life, time was something he tried to manage. Meetings stacked back to back, tasks jammed into tiny gaps, deadlines that always arrived too fast. And in the middle of it all, a quiet panic. Never enough hours, never enough progress. But in the monastery, time moved differently. The monks didn't rush, they didn't multitask, they weren't lazy, but they were deliberate. And yet somehow they got more done in less time, with less stress. Julian asked how that was possible. Their answer was simple. Most people don't lack time, they lack priorities. The problem isn't the clock, it's the clarity. Most people spend their days reacting to whatever's loudest, not moving toward what matters most. The monks taught Julian to see time not as something to fill, but as something to protect. Every minute, they said, is a piece of your life you never get back. If you wouldn't give someone your wallet, why give them your calendar? This shift changed everything. They gave him a rule: plan your day before the world does it for you. Every morning, before checking a single message, Julian sat in silence and asked 3 questions. What is the one thing I must do today to move forward? What distractions can I eliminate or delay? What would make today feel meaningful, not just busy? These questions became his compass. They reminded him that urgency is rarely the same as importance. Julian also began designing his days with intention, not as a rigid schedule, but as a series of rituals, predictable anchors that created rhythm, not rigidity. Mornings were for stillness, movement, and setting direction. Afternoons were for deep, focused work without distraction. Evenings were for reflection, rest, and resetting. This structure wasn't restrictive, it was freeing. It gave him clarity about where his energy should go and permission to ignore everything else. The monks explained that rituals protect what's sacred. In the modern world, distraction is always one tap away. Without rituals, focus becomes rare. And without focus, progress becomes accidental. They also taught him to build in white space, unstructured time. Not for productivity, but for presence. Time to walk, think, notice, breathe. Julian had once believed that every minute had to be optimized, but now he saw that space wasn't wasted time. It was where the mind resets, ideas emerge, and creativity refuels. One of the most practical habits he adopted was the 90-minute block. He would work with full intensity for 90 minutes, then step away for 10 to 15 minutes. Walk, stretch, breathe. No screens, no multitasking, just recovery. These breaks did more than recharge him. They made his focus sharper. He could get in 3 deep blocks a day and accomplish more than he used to in 10 scattered hours. The monks also emphasized the importance of boundaries, not just with people, but with technology. Julian created rules: no phone before breakfast, no email during creative time, no screens 1 hour before bed. These weren't punishments, they were acts of protection. Protection for his attention, for his energy, for his ability to choose how he lived. He also tracked his time, not obsessively but curiously. Where did it really go? What patterns drained him? What moments gave energy back? What he discovered was eye-opening. Small leaks, Scrolling, checking, switching tasks added up to hours each week. But once he saw them, he could reclaim them, not all at once, but gradually. And that shift gave him momentum. The monks left him with one final idea. Time is not something you spend, it's something you invest. Julian began asking, what am I investing in today? Who? What habits? What thoughts? He realized that every hour was casting a vote for the person he was becoming. Respecting time, he learned, was about respecting himself. Let's continue with Lesson 6. Serve others. The secret to joy, meaning, and connection. As Julian deepened his practice, something unexpected began to happen. He felt fulfilled, grounded, energized, but also strangely incomplete. He had focused on his mind, his purpose, his growth, his time, and yet a quiet question lingered. What is all of this for? The monks, observing this shift, knew exactly what was happening. They told him, a meaningful life cannot be built on self alone. You rise by lifting others. In the West, Julian had been trained to think in terms of success, achievements, promotions, influence. But here, success was measured differently, not by what you accumulate, but by how many lives you touch. They explained that the greatest joy is found in contribution. That real strength is not about rising above others, but in helping others rise. Julian asked them what this looked like in practice. They told him it begins with presence. The most powerful way to serve is to be there, fully, without agenda, without distraction. In a world starving for attention, your presence is a rare gift. Listening deeply, not fixing, not judging, just being. The monks modeled this constantly. Whether they were sweeping the floor, cooking, teaching, or walking through the garden, they gave all of themselves to that moment and to the people in it. Julian began practicing this. He started with small interactions, with the gardener, with fellow travelers, with villagers. He asked questions, he listened, he noticed when someone needed help and offered it without hesitation. Not to impress, just to serve. What surprised him most wasn't how grateful people were, it was how alive he felt. Helping others didn't drain him. It energized him. It gave his purpose weight. His growth suddenly had direction. Outward, not just inward. He began to see that contribution is not something separate from success. It's the very definition of it. The monks taught Julian a deeper truth. Serving others isn't just about kindness, it's about alignment with the highest part of yourself. When you help someone grow, heal, or move forward, you're reminded of your own power. And when you lift someone up, you rise too. But service doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It often shows up in the quietest ways: a generous word, a small favor, a willingness to pause and truly care. Julian realized that in his old life he had served his clients well, but he rarely served without an agenda. There was always a bill, a deadline, a transaction. Now he was learning to give simply because it felt right. He also noticed that his relationships changed. People opened up to him more easily, conversations deepened, trust grew. Not because he had all the answers, but because he was finally showing up as his full self, present, humble, and willing. The monks also taught him that service includes forgiveness, letting go of old grudges, freeing others and yourself from the weight of resentment. Because holding on to anger doesn't punish others, it poisons you. And service without forgiveness is incomplete. Julian worked through his own wounds, especially the ones he hadn't admitted. Regrets about the past, resentment toward people who had disappointed him, He didn't justify the harm, but he chose to release it, not for their sake, for his own peace. In doing so, he learned one of the monastery's quietest lessons. Healing yourself is a form of service, because a healed person hurts others less. This stayed with him. He began to see service not as charity, but as a way of being, an attitude, a daily posture. He looked for ways to serve with his time, his attention, his gifts, teaching, writing, supporting someone without being asked, creating systems that helped others grow, and always asking himself, where can I give more than I take? The monks told him that a life of service doesn't require poverty or self-sacrifice. It requires generosity of spirit. It asks that you build your life not just around success, but around contribution. Because in the end, your legacy is not what you own. It's who you helped become more alive. Lesson 7. Embrace the present. Peace, power, and presence. As Julian's transformation deepened, the monks shared one final, essential principle, one that quietly held all the others together, the power of presence. They told him, you can't master your mind, follow your purpose, grow, serve, or live with discipline if you are never here. Most people, they said, are prisoners of time. They live in the past, regretting, replaying, rewriting. Or they live in the future, worrying, rushing, chasing. But rarely are they in the only place where life is actually happening, the present moment. Julian knew this truth too well. His old life had been one long sprint into the future, always thinking about the next case, the next meeting, the next problem to solve. He was never fully where his feet were. Even his wins passed by in a blur. He would accomplish something, then immediately move to the next task, barely registering the moment. The result? Constant motion, but little fulfillment. The monks explained that presence isn't just peaceful, it's powerful. It's what allows you to choose, to create, and to feel deeply. Presence is where intuition lives, where focus sharpens, where gratitude becomes real. They gave Julian a morning ritual to train it, single tasking. Choose one activity, eating, walking, sipping tea, and do it with total awareness. No phone, no planning, just that one action, fully experienced. At first, it felt strange. His mind resisted. It wanted to speed up, check out, get to the next thing. But the more he practiced, the more he noticed subtle shifts. Colors looked brighter, sounds became clearer. He felt calmer without effort, like his nervous system was finally breathing. Presence, they told him, is a form of mental wealth. The more of it you cultivate, the richer your life becomes, regardless of circumstances. The monks explained that presence is not about escaping the world, it's about entering it more fully. When you're present, you see more clearly, respond more wisely, and live more deeply. You stop missing the very life you're working so hard to improve. Julian began to notice that when he was fully present with someone, even short conversations felt meaningful. When he was present during meals, he ate slower, felt more nourished, and digested better. When he was present during work, he made fewer mistakes and felt less drained. The quality of his life was improving, not because of big changes, but because he was finally there to experience it. One of the monks shared this idea with him. Peace is not found in perfect conditions, it's found in perfect presence.
Julian learned that presence is also the key to emotional freedom. So much suffering comes not from what's happening now, but from what the mind adds on top. The regrets of the past, the fear of what might come, the comparisons, the stories.
When you return to the present, even for a moment, you interrupt that cycle. You create space. And in that space, choice returns. The monks gave him a practice to anchor this. Throughout the day, pause and ask, "Where am I?" Not physically, but mentally. If your mind is racing, bring it back. Notice your breath. Feel your feet. Listen to the sounds around you. No judgment, just return. Over time, Julian began to see these pauses as power moves, not breaks from life, but entries into it. He wasn't less productive. He was more focused. He wasn't detaching. He was arriving. Presence also made his relationships more honest. He stopped pretending to listen while rehearsing responses. He let people finish. He looked them in the eye. And the connection deepened. Because presence is rare, and people feel it instantly. The monks told him that one of the greatest gifts you can give another person is your full attention. In a world of partial presence, full presence is a form of love. Julian also noticed that presence softened his inner world. His thoughts became less judgmental. His inner critic got quieter. The space between stimulus and reaction widened. He could see a thought without becoming it, hear a fear without obeying it. And that separation gave him strength. The lesson was simple. If you want peace, practice being here. Not when life slows down, not when things are perfect, but now, because now is all there ever is. Conclusion: live your legend, putting the lessons into practice.
Julian Lee didn't return to his old life.
He didn't go back to court. He didn't chase the next deal. He didn't try to rebuild the status he once had, because he had changed, and with that, his definition of success had changed too. He now measured his life by clarity, not complexity, by contribution, not comparison, by energy, not achievement. And that change didn't come from a single moment. It came from a series of daily choices, small, steady, intentional. He realized the path to transformation isn't paved with grand declarations. It's built with quiet discipline, deep presence, and consistent alignment. Every lesson the monks gave him had one thing in common: ownership. Master your mind. Follow your purpose. Practice Kaizen. Live with discipline. Respect your time. Serve others. Embrace the present. Each one is a choice, and each one brings you closer to your true self, the version of you that's been waiting beneath the noise. Julian learned that you don't need a crisis to change. You don't need to escape to the mountains. You just need to start living on purpose, right where you are. Create space in your morning. Speak with more intention. Slow down enough to notice. Be bold enough to serve. Be kind enough to yourself to stay consistent. The journey is yours. The tools are here. And the next step is not to think about them. It's to live them. Because the world doesn't need more people trying to be impressive. It needs more people willing to be present, disciplined, and awake to themselves and to others. That's how you change your life.
That's how you build true success.
And that's how you leave a legacy that actually matters. Not someday, but now.